square of Mexico City, history is before your eyes. The Aztec Templo Mayor was not only destroyed and buried, but its stones were used on the very same site to build the structures of colonial Mexico City.
And these are the weapons that defeated the Aztecs: the halberd, the pike, the arquebus, the cannon, the crossbow. An array of European iron and steel technology that would eventually defeat the native population.
Juan Rodriguez went with Francisco Orozco to subdue the Mixtecs in Oaxaca, but this time he was an officer with his own horse, and in Oaxaca he joined with Pedro de Alvarado, a key Cortes lieutenant, and moved farther south to conquer the Mayas of Guatemala. When you see Guatemala, you can see why it would take the Spanish years to conquer Central America. Active volcanoes, deep ravines, icy cold rivers, thick jungle. They had to fight the land itself, as well as the Indians who fiercely defended their land and their way of life. In 1524, 3 years after the fall of Tenochtitlan, the Spanish built Santiago as the capital of Guatemala. The city was built in the shadow of a volcano, and it was designed according to the king's plans for New World City. Juan Rodriguez was listed as one of the first citizens. Though Santiago no longer exists, its architecture remains just a mile away, here in the town of Antigua. Cabrillo lived in a large courtyard house, a casa poblada they called it, perhaps similar to this one. Here was his extended family, his children by an Indian woman, along with his wife, he later brought from Spain, their 2 sons, the retainers, and Indian servants.
This singular document was the story of the destruction of Santiago by earthquake and flood in the year 1541. It was written by Cabrillo and was the first non-religious document published in the New World. It was the beginning of secular journalism in the Western Hemisphere. If we stop for a moment, we can see a portrait of Cabrillo starting to emerge. He was an educated man, a wealthy farmer, a miner, a shipbuilder, and a merchant who traded with the Spanish in Peru. But it was in the year 1535, some 15 years after he had worked on the Bergantines in Tenochtitlan, that his skills as a shipbuilder would once again be called upon. Alvarado, now governor of Guatemala, asked his friend to build a fleet of ships to explore the South Sea. About 1538, Alvarado returned to Spain, where he obtained a license from King Carlos I to conquer any land he could find.
The king also wanted expeditions to push into the lands north of New Spain, to solve what they called the Northern Mystery. Now, almost simultaneously, 3 Spanish expeditions would be sent to find the answer, 2 by land and 1 by sea.
You know, actually, this obsessive dream of gold was not all that unreasonable. The Aztecs and the Incas had been rich prizes for Spain. Perhaps the gold seekers could again strike it rich. In 1539, Conquistador Hernán de Soto led the first expedition, the first Entrada. Starting with about 600 men, De Soto led them on a long, circuitous route northward and westward as far as the lands that would become Tennessee and Texas. They found buffalo, wilderness, severe winters, and primitive tribes of Indians defending their homeland, but no gold. In May of 1542, 3 years into the fruitless journey, De Soto died near the mouth of the Arkansas River, where it joins the Mississippi. 2 years earlier, while De Soto was on the trail, Viceroy Antonio de Mendoza, the first viceroy of New Spain, sent Francisco Vázquez de Coronado north from Compostela, a drought provincial capital some 500 miles west of Mexico City. He had the same aim as De Soto.
Coronado led his troops on another long, ill-fated journey. The Spanish got as far as today's town of Lyons, Kansas, about 75 miles northwest of Wichita, but there was no gold in the land of Más Allá. The expedition was considered a failure. Coronado returned to New Spain in disgrace. Well, the final attempt to unlock the Northern Mystery was made by sea. It turned out to be the great identifying journey of Cabrillo's life. And this was his ship, the galleon San Salvador, a 200-ton vessel built at the primitive port of Ixtapa by Cabrillo Shipwrights. His men built 8 of the 11 ships to be used on 2 expeditions, a huge task. San Salvador would sail up the west coast of New Spain on a great circle route towards the Orient and rendezvous with the other expedition that would go directly across the Pacific.
Well, it was here in Barra de Navidad that Juan Rodriguez set sail into San Salvador on June 27, 1542. But how did Cabrillo get to command the expedition? Well, Alvarado's death during an Indian uprising would give Cabrillo an unexpected assignment. Viceroy Mendoza now asked him to take command over one of the expeditions. He agreed, and that voyage is what brought me here, to the port of Navidad, on the Pacific Ocean, 400 miles due west of Mexico City. I haven't been able to find many landmarks in Cabrillo's life, but the sea might be a different story. The sea hasn't changed at all. So I've decided that the best way to search for Cabrillo at this point is to simply take the same trip he took and follow along in his watery way. We'll take along this copy of the log of the voyage to guide us.
The same Cabrillo as
not
the
exactly
beach.
a copy. It's a summary of Cabrillo's log that was made some years after the voyage by his chronicler Juan Leon. Historians argue about the true accuracy of it, but we'll use it to give us some idea of what they were actually up against on the trip.